We're in the book of Ezra this morning as we kind of hit the ending of 2nd Chronicles last week. And, the book of Ezra is a very unique book. Really, I told you Ezra, Esther, and Nehemiah go together. It's the last recorded history of the Old Testament of the Jews. But I think there's some really, really good lessons that we can learn out of this. Have you ever had a task that just seemed so enormous that you didn't want to get started on it? Maybe it's the dishes after Thanksgiving. Maybe it's, the boxing you need to fix around the house. That's me. Maybe it's a mechanic job. You know it needs done, but you just don't want to tear into it because, the more you do it, the bigger it's going to get. Well, the Jews were in that situation. And as we begin the book of Ezra, they were probably not remembering so much themselves, but had heard the stories of the city of David, Zion, Jerusalem, God's house. And these people had grown up hearing those stories from their ancestors because this was some 70 years later. They heard the story of Solomon's glorious temple. And how magnificent it was, all the gold and the brass and the bronze and the silver. And how evil Nebuchadnezzar came in and destroyed that city, plummeted the temple, burned it to the ground, and really left Zion nothing but a rubble. But nothing, I don't think, could be worse than taking the people away from their home and putting them somewhere else. I couldn't help but rethink the story of Elizabeth Smart. Most of us probably remember that. 14 years old, abducted out of her home by Brian David Mitchell and his wife. And she was held captive for 9 months, I believe. And there, in her own words, she was raped daily. I remember in an interview she said as she was there in captivity how she recalled home. And even in that vile, evil situation, her mind would drift to home. And I'm sure these Jews here stranded there in Babylon for these 70 years and all that they faced and all that they went through, their minds drifted back to their city, their home. John 10:10 says this way, and I believe this kind of applies to Nebuchadnezzar and ultimately our enemy. Jesus said, "The thief comes to steal, kill, and destroy." I think there's 3 considerations I'd like for us to look at. I'm going to read chapter 1. We're going to cover 1 and 2, but really 2's a list of names that I can't pronounce. So I'm not even going to venture there to read all those. But look at verse 1. It says, "Now in the first year of Cyrus, king of Persia, in order to fulfill the word of the Lord by the mouth of Jeremiah, the Lord stirred up the spirit of Cyrus, king of Persia, so that he sent a proclamation throughout all his kingdom, and also put it in writing, saying, Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, the Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has appointed me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judah. Whoever there is among you, of all his people, may his God be with him. Let him go up to Jerusalem, which is in Judah, and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel. He is the God who is in Jerusalem. Every survivor at whatever place he may live, let the men of that place support him with silver and gold, with goods and cattle, together with a freewill offering for the house of God, which is in Jerusalem. And then the heads of the fathers of the households of Judah and Benjamin, and the priests and the Levites arose, even every one whose spirit God had stirred to go up and rebuild the house of the Lord, which is in Jerusalem. All of those about them encouraged them with articles of silver, with gold, with goods and cattle, and with valuables, aside from all that was given as a freewill offering. And also King Cyrus brought out the articles of the house of the Lord, which Nebuchadnezzar had carried away from Jerusalem and put in the house of his gods. And Cyrus, king of Persia, had them brought out by the hand of Mithredath, the treasurer, and counted them out to Sheshbazzar, the prince of Judah. Now this was their number, 30 gold dishes, 1,000 silver dishes, 29 duplicates, 30 gold bowls, 410 silver bowls of a second kind, and 1,000 other articles. All the articles of gold and silver numbered 5,400. Sheshbazzar brought them all up with the exiles who went up from Babylon to Jerusalem. Three considerations this morning there in Ezra that I think we could really look at ourselves and consider ourselves. I want you, first of all, consider the casualty. Ezra opens up with this backdrop to the story that we really covered last week, but just to reiterate that, how devastating it was, is that devastation has taken place over the house of Judah. Over the southern kingdom, Nebuchadnezzar had invaded, and he had leveled the city, burnt the temple, burnt the house of God, and again, he had taken the people away. He had abducted them. He had taken them captive away to his land. This was, by the way, the Assyrian tactic in warfare. And it's the Babylonian tactic, is to go and defeat a territory, a nation, a country. You level the place out and you take all the people away. That's just the way they did things. Try to assimilate them into their society. If there is any analogy in this, I think it starts with this, that Satan desires to invade your life. Satan, he desires to invade your life so much that he is strategizing every minute of every day of how to defeat and hinder God's people and the people of the world from responding to God. That's his strategy. He isn't just sitting somewhere, playing with his little pitchfork as Hollywood would like for us to believe, but he is strategizing of how to get you to fall. Relentless reconnaissance. You military guys know what reconnaissance is. It's where you go into the enemy territory and you scope it out and you try to get all the details, how many they are, what are their strengths, what are their weaknesses, watching, gathering, noticing the cracks in their movements, trying to find a place of attack. Where are the slips? He takes note of this. Know this. He takes note of what's important to you. He does. He takes note of that. If you are familiar with, the great theologian C.S. Lewis, and if you ever read the Screw Tape Letters, you kind of see this play out in this fictional book of where C.S. Lewis writes of a commanding demon. His name is Screw Tape. And he's communicating with his nephew, who is a junior demon, Wormwood. And he's talking about how to trick and how to get people to fall, especially in the area if you can get them to be prideful. Think of themselves, and then we can lead them astray step by step. And that's really, in a sense, I know that's a fictional book, but it is a fact of how the dark world works. It is looking to see where you will trip and fall. It's scrolling through the internet and you run across that ad that has a lady who maybe is half dressed and you pause. Or you don't open it because you know better than that, but you just pause and then you move on. He notices that. He notices our weaknesses. He notices what we pay attention to. And he begins to lay out a strategic plan to get us to fall. If there's anything, we must notice the casualty that Satan desires to invade your life. Listen to this. On the other side of this, when the Medo-Persian Empire conquered Babylon, it's an amazing story of how they went about it. Cyrus had conquered some of the areas around Babylon, but Babylon had a massive wall. They said it was 80-something feet thick, 320 foot high. and 56 miles around. It was so large that they would have chariot races on the top of it. How did Cyrus and the Persian Medo Empire get in there? Daniel, I believe it's chapter 5, kind of tells when this happened. He doesn't say how it happened, but if you remember, Belshazzar had a vision of a hand writing on the wall. He called Daniel, and Daniel basically told him, tonight, your kingdom will be given to someone else. What the Persians did is they diverted the entire Euphrates River because it flowed under the wall and through the city. They diverted the river until they could wade under. They waded under the walls, and the entire Persian army was in the city before they ever knew it. There was no resistance whatsoever. As a matter of fact, they said that the citizens of Babylon opened the bronze gates as Cyrus rode in a victor. But see, Satan, the devil, our adversary, he works just that way. He strategizes, he develops a plan, and before you know it, he has waded into our life, and it's too late. It's too late for us to react. It's too late for us to do anything. Satan right now, mark this down, Satan right now is planning and strategizing of how you're going to fall. He's working on it. He is putting his all into it. 1 Peter 5:8 says this, be sober, be alert, be mindful. Your adversary, the devil, goes about like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. That's his job. It's not just the bad side of a Sunday school story. It's not just to create a villain, but Satan is looking to invade your life. He wants to get, he's like the relentless salesman. He gets his foot in the door so you can't shut it. That's what he's doing today, this morning, right now. He and his dark forces, those demonic entities with him, they are strategizing to get you to fall. Also this, Satan not only desires to invade your life, but listen to this, Satan desires to isolate your life. You see that strategy that Babylon used, they would attack Judah, and then they took the captives. Their idea is this, without any nationalistic bond, there could be no rebellion. So they took those captives. It was actually, if you watch the Dukes of Hazzard as the crow flies, it was 500 miles from Jerusalem to Babylon. But a caravan had to go 900 miles around the mountains to get to Babylon. He carried those captives that far. So there could be no association with who they were and what they were. And I tell you this morning that he tried to destroy any unity, any family bond, any national tie. And I want to say this morning, Satan wants to make you feel alone. Satan wants you to feel like you're the only one in the world that's going through this. Look at all them other people in church. They're lifting their hands, they're singing, they're praising, everything's going good for them. But no, God's left you alone. He's not here to help you. And so Satan isolates us because, listen to this, when we're alone, we're weak. When we're alone, we have no support. When we're alone, we have no encouragement. When we're alone, we have no one to come along beside of us and help us along the way. A cord of 3 strands is stronger than one, right? A family, a tie, a church, people who are committed to Christ and walking together is stronger than one person walking alone. But I tell you, Satan wants to make you feel alone, like you're out there by yourself. And this is the last thing. Satan desires to shatter what is sacred. They tore that temple down. That magnificent temple that Solomon had built with all the treasures that King David had taken from their enemies. Now Solomon comes along and he built this glorious temple there. See, the temple, with the temple gone, there's no meeting with God. God doesn't, and I know I said this the other week, there's a country song out there, that's where I meet God. You know, I meet God over there. I meet God when I'm fishing. They met God in the temple, and it was the only place to meet God. They didn't meet God by the river. They didn't meet God down, at the schoolhouse. They didn't meet God on the tractor, bush hogging. They met God at the temple, and with no temple, there's no meeting God. That's how much this meant to them. But Nebuchadnezzar tore the temple down and demolished it. No temple, no meeting, no temple, no sacrifices, no forgiveness. And there's a people who was steeped in their sin, and they couldn't even meet with God. But I tell you this morning, on a different note, homes are full this morning where what was sacred to people has been destroyed. Jack, we prayed about it back there this morning. Jack prayed about all the people who are not in church. It seems like we've had a mass exiting of the church. And I don't know, I'm really tired of blaming it on COVID, because I don't think that's the issue. I just think their sacred thing has been broken. Somehow Satan has invaded, and he's broken what is sacred. And this morning, people who would normally be sitting in church, people who would normally, they've been here for years, they led Sunday school for years, they were deacons for years, but this morning they're not. Because what's sacred has been crushed. Satan has come into their life. This morning, bass boats are full on all the lakes around us with people who would say, I'm a Christian and I love God. Now, I'm not saying it's wrong to go fishing. I'm not even going to say it's wrong to go fishing on Sunday. But I tell you this, every Sunday of every week, every Sunday of every month, every Sunday of every year, if I've got something going on, then something sacred is broken in my life. I'm disconnected from God. My temple is broke down, and God's not meeting me there. Listen here, deer stands are going to be forward up here in a few weeks with something where their sacred thing has been broken. They'll climb a deer stand. They'll drive 700 miles. They'll track over creeks and through acorn patches to discover, where Big Billy Buck is. But church, God, following Him is the furthest thing from their mind. Something sacred has been broken. Ball games. Wow. You meddling now, preacher. Ball games. Look at how many people, you watch the Clemson game, you watch the Carolina game, Georgia game. Look at the people in attendance there. But yet our church houses there's a mass exit. Racetracks. I could go on and on. I could get on your favorite thing. But the point is this, that Satan desires to shatter the sacred part of your life. The sacred part of your life is your connection with God. And what he does is he shatters that. And we start substituting something else that draws us out. It keeps us away from the house of God. It keeps us away from serving Him and loving on His family and learning and growing. Not that there's anything wrong with those things in and of themselves, but what it creates is a vast chasm between us and God. We have a hard time getting back. Consider the casualty there. Consider the choice. Whoever there is among you, in verse 3, Cyrus wrote. You see, the Jews, they've been here for 70 years. And they're looking at this great Persian empire and these few little measly Jews. How will we ever get back to our homeland? How are we ever going to do that? Are we going to attack this empire and tear it down? No, that's impossible. It was an absolute impossibility. And then you're faced with this. Well, who's going to go back? Well, Martha just opened up a bakery there on Persian Boulevard, selling kosher breads that's been baked. It's booming. I ain't going back now. We're making too much money over here. These Persian people love this kosher bread. We're going to stay here because things are going well. They got comfortable there. We all make conscious choices. I think is the thing to see here. There's a choice. Do I serve God and go back, or am I going to stay here in the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, as a captive? What's going to be my choice? I think this is what I get from this. Have you ever said this? I fell into sin. I just fell into it. You might fall in a hole. You might fall in a pile out in the pasture. You might, fall down a bank or down a driveway. I took Blakely to the trampoline park over there in Anderson, Big Air, and I fell a bunch of times. And all those younger parents, they're just laughing at their granddad out there running around, And I paid for it this morning when I got up. I fell there. But when it comes to sin, I want to tell you how I do it, and you do it. We know what we want, and we know what God says about it. And we waver to two, and we step. We don't fall. We don't trip. We voluntarily, consciously choose to go into sin. I would say this. I would guarantee that 99% of sin, none of it is fell into. It's stepped into. It's jumped into. It's run into. Thinking about all those captives, and Cyrus said you can go back. That only 50,000 Jews went back to rebuild the city, to rebuild the temple, and to rebuild the walls. How many? Somebody tell me how many people was at the Clemson game at the beginning of it yesterday? 80. I think they hold 80,000 up there or more. And it might have been down to a couple 10,000 at the end, but only 50,000 people chose to go back and rebuild a city, a temple, and the walls. There's only a remnant that's willing to get out there and follow Christ. At the time of Christ, there was over 1 million Jews in the Babylonian Empire, Babylon. Over 1 million. How many people chose just to sit back and not go forward and not go honor God with that? Why? Why, Pastor? Because they were comfortable. They were comfortable there. They were prosperous. God had, even in their captivity, had made them prosper. And they found favor. They found favor with their captors, just like Joseph did. And there, they began to bloom and blossom. That's what Jeremiah told them to do. Get married, buy a house, plant a vineyard. You're going to be here. You might as well enjoy it. And so God began to prosper them. And then they became comfortable. Oh, man. Christians, I believe, have become so comfortable with this world. Jesus said, you're in the world, but you're not of the world. You're here. You don't have a choice. You're a human being. You're in the world. But he said, you're not of the world. The same lust and the same desires and the same ambitions that the world has is not yours. But Christians, we become too comfortable. We love its luster. We love what the world has to offer. We love its rewards. We love the way it makes us feel. We love its false freedoms. You notice I said false freedoms. There's people out there that think they're living free, maybe just today because they're hiking up a mountain somewhere, but freedom is only found in Jesus Christ. It is not found anywhere else. Anything else that you think gives freedom to neglect God and go after it is a false freedom. You don't have it. You're like the dog that's tied up on a long chain. As he's going across the yard to the mailman, he thinks he's free until the chain tightens up and it jerks a knot in his neck. Friends, if we are focused and we're comfortable with anything else, it is false. Freedom only comes in Christ. Listen to this. Not only is they become comfortable, but that's too hard. That's too hard. I've had people tell me, maybe I ask them about going to church, going to church ain't the answer. Jesus Christ is the answer, but this is part of it, right? Maybe I said, you go to church, that's my only day off, man. I got to sleep in a little bit. You go to church this past week, man, it's the only day that I get to take my kids here fishing or doing whatever. It's too hard to get up and do that. You read your Bible, it's too hard to read my Bible. I don't understand it. Do you go to a discipleship class? That's too hard, man. I want to tell you something, that living spiritually is hard. To live a spiritual life is not easy, friends. It's something that comes with effort. Giving in is easy. Giving in to the world is easy. Compromising, that's easy. Indulging, that's easy. Lying over the truth, that's easy. Indiscretion over honesty. Corruption over character, those are easy. But for you to make a commitment to live for Christ, I want to tell you what, you live in a world that's going to make that hard. Your body, your mind, everything about you is geared to reject that. It is a conscious choice that we make, even though it's hard. It's hard to pray. It's hard to take time out of our day and get on our knees and really, genuinely pray for people. It's hard. Because you're thinking, man, I got a million things I could do. I could be fixing that car. I could be catching that calf that's out. I could be, digging that water line that needs to be over there. I could be baking the food for Sunday. Something always I could be doing. But there's nothing going to enrich our day like getting before God in prayer and opening up to Him. It's hard. Maybe this. I kind of wrote this down as a last thought. There's nothing in it for me. I imagine some of those captives there in Babylon, when they were given the opportunity to go back to their homeland, to rebuild the house of God, to meet Yahweh again there and have forgiveness of their sins. There's nothing in it for me. Well, what am I going to get out of that? I got this great business going. I'm tailoring clothes over here for all these Persian people, and they're buying them like crazy. Why would I want to get out of this and go back to Jerusalem, to a leveled city, and start toting rocks and mortar to rebuild buildings? There's nothing in that for me. And I tell you this, that I believe the Christian church today, that is vastly the biggest problem, is that we approach the church as if it's for us. What's in it for me? The big churches got the movie theaters, and they got the Bronco Bulls on the stage and motorcycle racing around the church. But what's in it for them? I'm not saying about what anybody does. It's their business. But what I am saying is this: I don't care what church you are, I don't care what denomination you are, I don't care how big you are, how small you are, how round you are, how square you are, how tall. It is about Christ. It is about Christ and Him alone. The church is a place to give, not get. We get because we give. But I imagine that there were plenty of people who stayed there in that position and in that condition because they thought, there's nothing in that for me. Why do I want to do that? That's crazy. Get out of here, Ezra. Christianity is Christ-centered, not me-centered. Very quickly, let's consider this, the last consideration. Consider the call that those Jews received. It says there in verse 5, Cyrus in his decree said, everyone whose spirit God has stirred up. If you want to go back to Jerusalem, God stirs your spirit, go. Jesus said in Matthew 22:14, many are called, but few are chosen. Many hear the call. Many hear the call to come to salvation, but few respond. Many hear the call to do and to give up on this life, but they don't. They don't. But look at this. I want to share with you 3 little things right here in closing. If you consider the call and you answer the call of God, God opens doors. We wonder sometimes why doors are not opening for me, and why I'm stuck here in this condition and I can't move forward. And I think a lot of times we're not listening to God and following and committing to Him. But listen, when you commit to God, when you sign up, God opens doors that only He can open. He can only open them and no man can shut. He stirred Cyrus's heart. Remember at the beginning of this, I told you those Jews, look there, how are we going to be able to do this? How can we do? We can't attack the Persian Empire. We're just captives. But God opened the door. God swung the door of freedom. And He done it by the greatest man in the empire, Cyrus. He opened the door. That's something that only God can do. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine the public school system saying, we're going to allow prayer to Jesus back in school again. We can't imagine that. We're way beyond that. But the point I want to say is this: God is in control. And He opens the doors that no man can shut. And if we commit our life to Him, He opens doors. Impossibilities become opportunities. And possibilities before us opened up as opportunities. When God calls us, He opens the doors that only He can open. But also we have God's resources. If you notice there in verse 7 of that, I won't go through all of it again, but they brought back all this gold and all this silver. Cyrus even went back to all the stuff that Nebuchadnezzar had looted from the temple, and he brought it out. And he said, "Here, this is yours. Take it back to the house of your God." When you sign up with God and you commit to Him, I want to tell you this: God supplies the resources. You don't have to dig deep in your pockets. You don't have to try to think you got to do things that you can't do. God supplies the resources. Those captives didn't have anything. They couldn't have never replenished that temple. They probably didn't have enough cattle, that would be a food source for them on the way back to Jerusalem. But God supplied. God gave everything that was needed. God never calls us without providing for us. Where God calls you, God will provide for you. What God's calling you to do, in your marriage, He's going to provide for you. In your career, He's going to provide for you. In your relationships, He's going to provide for you. In your finances, He's going to provide for you. God supplies the resources. But also look at this, and I think this is one of the most important. Is not only does God open doors, God gives us resources, but He gives us people. If you read chapter 2, you'll see there's just a whole host of names there that, and some big names mentioned. Zerubbabel, he led the first wave back in. Ezra led the second wave, and then Nehemiah led the last wave. In other words, there's a support group. There'll be a support group for you. When you feel like you're all alone and Satan has cut you out of the pack, in God's family, there's a support group. I can't tell you how many times when I first started pastoring, and we was talking about this lady the other day. Her name is Joy Wood, dear friend of mine. And, got up there in Greenville and kind of no man's land. And ever so often, it wasn't every week or every month, it may have been a couple times a year, I'd get a card in the mail. And Joy just she wasn't a pope or she wasn't an apostle. She wasn't a bishop. She was just a Christian lady in our church. She'd send me a card. And she'd always say, "Scott, prayed for you today. Prayed for your family. Pray." And you know what? That's so much support. And that's what you get in God's family. We get God's people. I need God-focused people on my journey. I don't need someone whose focus is over here on money. I don't need someone's focus is over here on power. I want people around me, walking with me through this life who are God-focused. Because they're going to help me discover who I am and get to where I need to be. I want people with godly morals and values. I want people who stand for God's morality and God's values. Because Satan is trying desperately to trip each one of us up. And I need someone along the side of me who holds my hand. Says, "Don't go there. Don't do that. Do this." I need some people filled with godly wisdom. That's what I need. I don't need bad advice from half-hearted people. I need someone to be honest, straightforward, and say, if you continue down this road, this is where you're going to end up. Get your heart and your mind right. I had a guy tell me, one of the greater turning points of my life, Christian life, he said, "Your problem, Scott, is you just don't love God." That struck a chord in me. And I tell you, it wasn't long after that I recommitted my life. Before cell phones and GPSs and all that was developed, there was a wayward son. Had gotten away from home, living life his own way, doing his own thing. And he hadn't had contact for his family for many years. He got homesick, and he wanted to go home. He wrote his mother and father a letter, and he said, if it's okay that I come home, he said, would you tie a white rag or ribbon around the tree out in front of the house? And so he headed home on the train. And he was afraid to look because he was afraid that his mom and dad wouldn't have the white ribbon out. So he nudged the guy sitting next to him. He closed his eyes. He said, when we pull into the station, he said, look there off of Main Street and tell me if you see a white ribbon tied around a tree. And the man responded, he said, no, I don't. He said, I see ribbons tied on the branches. I see ribbons tied on the leaves. I see ribbons around the trunk of the trees. I see ribbons in every tree in the yard, every bush, every pole. The boy was welcome home. The book of Ezra is about returning to God. And I'm going to tell you that a great opportunity for us today is to return to God, because I'm going to tell you this, He's got ribbons tied all over the cross for you to come home, for me to embrace Him. We don't have to go back and rebuild a temple. We just need to come to the cross. Stand with me, heads bowed and eyes closed.